I think it's something that we all need to address. And that's where this whole project has landed me. And I don't know if I've ever explained the whole point of the bipolar butterfly is originally it was the two sides of bipolar. But I also feel like it represents all mental illness because on one side, we're all trying to show, our game face and our best beautiful self, and we're fine. And we have no idea what's happening on the other side. So many of us are crumbling. And my biggest thing is, and my children will tell you, and I tell you, it's kindness. None of us know what anyone's experiencing. And I don't care how mean someone is or how just you don't make sense how that person, there's something happening there. Either they're not getting hugged enough, or they're not getting enough sunlight. I don't know what it is. I had a terrific life. I can't complain. I feel like I've gotten everything I need. So I assume a lot of people don't get everything they need. So just be kind.
Welcome to Tad Voices. I'm Nick.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Lawson. And we're friends who are here to talk about mental health.
We are by no means experts in this field, nor is this a substitute for professional help, but we can promise open and vulnerable conversations that highlight the strength of some amazing people who have decided to share their story with us.
Talk, share, help. And thanks for listening.
We now welcome the founder of the Bipolar Butterfly Project, Kimmy Henderson. Kimmy is combating mental health challenges as an accidental art activist. Her organization, the Bipolar Butterfly Project, hopes to raise awareness and help end the stigma on mental illness by opening comfortable dialogue with public interactive art installation. We are so excited to learn more about bipolar disorder, expression through art, and Kimmy's experiences. Welcome to the podcast, Kimmy Henderson.
Wow, that's really nice. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Kimmy. And I think it's almost, unfortunate that this kind of continues to be a question, how we open up the podcast, but kind of just what we'd like to know is, how are you doing and what have you kind of been up to in the midst of COVID?
Oh, well, it's actually kind of funny because the Bipolar Butterfly Project started in November 2019, and it has literally just, blossomed through COVID and through 2020, and I just never expected it to go as well as it has. So it was pretty much born, during this year. So things are going well for me.
That's actually great to hear.
Yeah. Mental health wise, I mean, everybody's kind of stressed right now and everybody's, but fortunately for me as a creative individual, I kind of flourish under stress. So it's just been, inspirational for me.
Good. Well, I think, without further ado, we'd like to sort of open the floor to you to talk about, your mental health story and how you, decided to become a mental health advocate.
Okay. I did not decide at all. It totally chose me. I did not plan any of this the way it happened. But in a nutshell, I had a really shiny, happy childhood. And I was on speech team. I was a cheerleader. I did theater. I was very outgoing. I was on track to be a teacher, just like my sisters. I did great academically. 2 weeks before my sophomore year, I had experienced a devastating car accident coming home from a family vacation. And a lot happened, but pretty much when I was 19, both of my arms were in a cast, my wrist and my shoulders. I had a cast around my left legs. I tore out my tendon and I had 3rd-degree acidic burns around my waist. So it was a very humbling experience, but that's when I first experienced depression. And it was pretty much circumstantial. It was kind of justified by what I was going through, and we didn't really think about it being anything more than that. But after that, I experienced anxiety for the first time. And I had totally just 180'd. I didn't want to talk in front of people. It just made me nauseous having to go to class. I remember driving up to Kent and I couldn't make myself go in. And that was just all very new to me. And at the time, my family will say there was like post-accident Kimmy and, pre-accident Kimmy. And I mean, now that I'm older, I realize more of my life has been after than before. But I kind of lost track. I switched my major 4 times. And I switched schools, and after 6 years, I didn't finish. I have several associates that I've never used, but I ended up bartending for almost a decade before I started painting. So after my son was born, I found a window that I wanted to paint to display, and I doodled my entire life, and I've sketched all over the place on notes and on calendars and envelopes, but I never experienced painting, and I immediately found love, and I discovered I could do it. I didn't realize, I would be as good at it as I was. And I just got involved with the local art scene where I was bartending. And I had my stuff on display there, and I was involved with the local art shows and stuff. And I painted wine glasses for my old boss. And that changed everything for me. And then with the help of social media, excuse me, I went from selling at local events and I went to shipping worldwide, and I was featured in magazines, and I looked really legit, and people would send me like applications, but it was literally just my dining room kitchen table covered, my counters covered, and me painting behind the scenes with, a baby and a toddler. I was a mess. So I looked a lot more professional, I think, online than I was in real life. Things were going really well. I had an opportunity to sell with a national brand store, but I just couldn't keep up with business. I was researching, hiring people, and licensing and whatnot. And then I had my first major manic episode. So after that, business pretty much halted. And after rebound, I realized, actually, let me backtrack, sorry. During that manic episode, before I was diagnosed, I painted a butterfly. And it just came to me. I don't know where it came from, but the side of its wings were dripping and the other side was whole and normal. And afterwards, I realized my sister-in-law said, Kimmy, that represents bipolar so well, because there's like the beautiful creative side for me, and then the just chaotic, melting, depressive side. And I shared about that. I was blogging at the time for my glassware, and I had such a response and an outpour that I did not expect just from mental health community. So much of an outpour. I'm like, okay, I need to paint a series and, just proceed with this. So honestly, it was a few years before I finally really got around to taking it seriously, just because I was busy with motherhood and I taught classes and I just, I had a lot going on. But once I did start painting, one day I heard a segment on NPR, and it was about mental health and violence, pretty much. So suicide, mass violence, all these awful statistics. And the one that I could not stop obsessing about was the number 2 cause for death for 10 to 34-year-olds is suicide. And that it ate at me, because I have a 10-year-old. Well, she was 10 at the time, and a 13-year-old. And I never really struggled with depression. Like after the car accident, I was depressed, and that was, like I said, circumstantial and justified. But rebounding after mania, the way my doctor told me, he put it, like it's a bank account. Like the higher you go, the lower your rebound is going to be, if that makes sense. And my first experience, I'm lucky to not have been hospitalized. I would have been hospitalized if I went to a doctor that didn't know me, but I was lucky that we had a family established doctor, because it turns out this runs in my family. And he was able to fit me in. And that first night, he's like, okay, yeah, you would be admitted right now. But since I was pretty complacent and I was kind of, I don't know, I wasn't violent and I wasn't fighting at all, I took medication and I stayed at my parents' house for 3 weeks instead of being, hospitalized for 3 weeks. So I'm really fortunate for that. And then I have such a good family support system for that. I'm totally losing track now. Oh, the depression side. I never experienced depression like I do when I rebound before. And I am not by any means suicidal. I don't think I ever really was a problem of being suicidal, but I did think about death more than I think is healthy. And I did think about how my children and my family and just like what it would be like for them. I just visualized life after me way too much. It's just not healthy. And when I hear stories about people, like you hear these crazy stories about, mothers hurting their loved ones and just things that don't make sense, I realize how out of your head you are in mania. And like I've heard stories and I've experienced from family, but until you're there, I was delusional. I mean, I was delusional. I was not violent, but the things that I thought were real and the things I thought were truth was just not. And I'm jumping around a lot, sorry. So when I heard these statistics about 10-year-olds, really any age, resorting to suicide and realizing how much darker they had to go than what I felt. Just, I don't know. I'm like, I've got to do something with this and change it for my children. So I ended up deciding that I responded to a call for an open call for artists for a mural. And that was November 2019. And I shared my story with them, and there was a wall on the other side. And I said, I shared my story and I asked them if I could paint the first bipolar butterfly on the other side of the wall free of charge. They were like, yeah, do it. So that started everything. And then in February, I saw there was a call for women's sculptural art, which I know nothing about sculpture art. I'm just a painter. So I reached out to metal fabricators. First company that responded to me was like, we want to be on board. This speaks so much to us and our staff. And they collaborated with me, Falls Metal Fabricators in Akron, Ohio. I could not have done this without them. And through their generosity and wanting to be a part of it, we built this amazing sculpture for Stan Hewitt Hall, which is it's a prestigious historical, building and gardens in Ohio. And it's just built from that. So I didn't plan any of it. And all these opportunities are just like unfolding themselves for me. And literally, I'm just along for the ride. I don't know I can't tell you what I'm going to do next. I have like a lot of things opening for 2021, but I'm just, I didn't expect this to have such a response. It's turning into its own thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's, I can imagine that's probably pretty exciting for you. That's awesome.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it's at the point now where I don't want it to be about my art anymore. I want it to like be its own thing. And eventually I want to collaborate with like other artists and other opportunities, because honestly, my dream is one, that this goes worldwide. And I truly believe it has potential to, just from the response I've received. And there's so many, celebrities and just so many influencers right now advocating for mental health that I know it has the possibility, and there's platforms out there for it. But I really want to give mental health a visual representation that builds community and support as effectively as pink ribbons and rainbows do. I would love this to be
Great.
like people see it and they recognize it. And then companies are like, okay, we want to incorporate that into our logo during this time of the year or whatnot. I want to use it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's kind of interesting that you say that, because when I first checked out your Instagram page, like obviously the first thing I noticed, like everything's vibrant and it's just like aesthetically pleasing to look at, but then also too the fact that there's just like the meaning behind it, and me personally, it was just like almost like something like click, like, oh, that makes, like, it does make a lot of sense what you're doing and kind of that creative outlet. So I think everybody's certainly happy that you shared your story, and we appreciate you sharing it with Tad specifically. But kind of the question that I wanted to get into a little bit was maybe, and you could talk a little bit about like the importance of drawing and kind of how that might help you combat kind of negative feelings.
Oh, absolutely. You mean like as a creative outlet?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I do teach classes, and I can't tell you how many people tell me I'm not an artist. I can't, I'm not creative. I can't even draw stick figures. And honestly, once you get into it and you relax, there is an artist inside of everyone. There really is. And it might not be your medium to draw or sketch or paint. It could be music, or cooking or writing, whatever. But I think everyone has some kind of creative element that is there to help them just cope, and just to give them a release of emotion. It's kind of funny. My family will tease me because I paint to kind of sad music. I love film scores. Like it is sad. And honestly, I get emotional and it makes me cry, but I realize that's my release. It's how I let out my pent up emotion is, pretty much through sadness. But I just think it's important for me, drawing and painting. I'll say I'm going to take a break. I'm not going to do any more work because I do a lot of commission, which, of course it's a great job, but it's not as fun, as just painting what I want to paint. So I will take a break from that, but I still end up painting. I just can't not do it, whether it's relaxing or for work. And I just think it's important for everyone to try new things. Because like I said, I didn't try painting until I was 28 years old. Creative things to try.
Yeah, and going sort of back through that, I guess my question is, your first experience with Mania, where did art fit for you before during, and after. So you talked about the rebound and obviously coming out of a situation that had to have been so unsettling for you and your family and all of that. And like, I guess when you were rebounding, what role did your painting, or, you know, obviously you've coming out of that, you founded the Bipolar Butterfly Project, right? So could you just sort of talk about like maybe that, like it being very normal for you, I guess, like this feeling of like, oh, I've picked up this paintbrush before, right? And like feeling like it's sort of like riding a bike. Like, could you sort of talk through just like what it meant for you going through that period of your life?
Absolutely. Okay, so once I was diagnosed, and I was 35, so that's kind of actually later, I know, for common diagnosis, but I can look back and I can clearly see a pattern. So my mania, my hypomania, I didn't peak and need medical anything until I was 35, my first. But looking back, I've had small elevations. There's definitely been times where I'm super creative and I'm excited and I'm staying up all night painting and like establishing Makiki's art. I didn't say. My original brand is Makiki's Art, which is Mama and Aunt Kiki mushed together. When I tried to get a domain name, Mama Kiki was taken, so I did Makiki, and I love it because people call me Makiki now that don't know me, and I totally love it. But looking back, when I was my full-blown mania, before I realized it, I was creating. And like I said, the butterfly, I don't even know where that came from. It was just something that came to mind. It was completely creative. It wasn't a commission. It was nothing that, like when I started Wine Glasses, I focused on bridal parties, and I did logos for companies, and a lot of it was just commission ordered work. And this was just totally free flowing and organic. And then I peaked and I was sedated, and it was probably months of depression for me. And I didn't paint. I didn't want to. So I know my depression side is when I'm not motivated. And even now I can tell when I'm having a little bit of a low, because I will paint stuff for people and I just don't like it. And I keep redoing it. I'm not satisfied, because if I'm not in that zone and happy, I feel like my work suffers and it's just not pleasing to me. And I'm very specific about stuff I do for other people. So being a creative, looking back, there was always a little bit of a hypomania. Like I said, I never really experienced depression until I rebounded from my first episode. So I went through a while where I just didn't want to do anything. I didn't paint. I was just, honestly, I felt like a zombie for a while. I wasn't myself. It took a while to find a regime that worked for me. We went through different medications. I couldn't even tell you what all I've been on. My husband knows, but I have a terrible memory. And honestly, a lot of it is a blur to me. But I think once I started feeling like myself again is when I started just painting for fun. And then I really wanted to do the butterflies, which I've been thinking about forever, especially doing prints, because I've always painted on glass or wood, something you can't make copies of, which is not lucrative by any means. Starving artist is very real. You can only paint so much at a time. And as successful as I appear to be, it's not financially, lucrative. It's very just paint to order. So I wanted to get into prints anyway. And I've been not purposely putting it off. I just was really busy. And actually the day I decided to really get into it, I had a diagnostics mammogram. My mother's a 2-time breast cancer survivor. And I had a diagnostic, which means like a shadow showed up and I have to go back every 6 months to be checked to make sure it's not something. And the last time I was there, I was in the waiting room for like 2 hours because the records weren't transferring properly. But in my head, I'm just catastrophizing, and I am a catastrophizer. I blow up the worst scenario within seconds in my head of every situation. But I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm out of time. I need to get started on this before I get sick and can't do it. And that got me started. And thank goodness I'm okay. I'm fine for now. But it just took that fire to get started. And in general, I don't want to sound, I'm not a procrastinator by any means. I just literally am at deadline for everything because I have too much happening in my head. So I'm 100% creative, 0% organized. I'm not good at it. I'm a mess. My house is a mess. My children and my husband will all tell you I'm a mess.
I think that's kind of maybe not typical, but kind of associated with more of an artistic mindset,
Very
though,
true.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to jump in before Lawson asks a question, but I actually was just on the phone with Ben today, and we were talking about sort of, the process of seeking help and understanding where one is within their own mental health challenges, and it could be, as small as just, sleeping more, or then removing yourself from a situation and all of that. And I just want to say that, like, I'm very, happy for you that, as you sort of see your art sort of, or the feeling of wanting to paint, or the feeling of wanting to pick up a paintbrush, or even think about what's creative for you, right? Like how, you've now put that together where you're like, oh, okay, like this, I'm not at the top of my game. I need to maybe reassess where I am and move forward from there. And I think that our listeners, like, the scale, the spectrum of like where that falls, like that's all mental health, right? That's not anxiety. It's not bipolar disorder. It's, as somebody fits on that spectrum, if you can identify when you're going through something where you're just not at the top of your game, like being able to identify that is awesome, because you're basically telling yourself, like, it's okay that I'm not okay right now, but I'm now going to do something to combat it. And I think that's so awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, I'm happy to. I definitely think right now, like for me personally, a lot of people contact me and they want to talk about, their kid or their relative or whatever. And I feel bad because I am not by any means an expert and I really can't I can tell my story, but as you know, every story is different. There is no specific. And my doctor will tell you I'm pretty textbooked for bipolar. I've had my first major episode. I rebounded. About a year and a half later, I had another episode, but it didn't go as far because we recognized the symptoms. So the first experience, I'm in denial. I had loved ones tell me that we think you're manic. And I'm like, no, I get very spiritual. And I was convinced that it was 100% true. And then after that, my last one, they've just been gradually smaller because we're learning. And like my husband will recognize it before I do. And that's one thing that's really hard, I think, for people who are diagnosed bipolar, is to know that when you're too happy, like when things are going too well, there might be something wrong. And for me, when I'm not feeling that, knowing that I'm capable of that, like physical health, I don't work out at all. But when I'm manic, I am so in shape. I am so, diligent about exercising, and I just have confidence. And when I'm not there, I'm like, I know I can do it. I know I have that confidence inside. I know I have that, discipline inside, but I just cannot tap into it like I can when I'm manic. And I think I think a lot of people that deal with depression or whatever, we all kind of know that. People are like, why can't you snap out of it, or just make yourself? You can't. You literally can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a good point to touch on. But I think in itself too, like just, by no means at all are Nick and I experts either, but just having people like yourself come on and tell their stories, it's so helpful for so many others just to hear that, and knowing that you're not alone. So just in itself, that's a tremendous positive. But I guess the next question that I have, and you kind of mentioned staying with your parents for a few weeks. So maybe family plays an important role for you, but kind of, are there any other coping mechanisms that you have just for maybe times that are more difficult than others that you lean on, or perhaps painting's one of them as well?
I hate to say it, but truly painting is my biggest.
Yeah, spoiled it a little bit for you.
It's so cliche. I know it sounds like, as an artist, my creativity is my coping. It really is, and I'm lucky to have that. I am very fortunate to have had that happy, supportive family. I cannot imagine going through what I went through if I didn't have that advocacy in my life, and going through this experience, when I see just the world in general, and when I hear stories about anyone, I'm like, it has changed my perception of everything. Any questionable activity that any human has, I'm like, there might be a chemical imbalance there. You know what I mean? Like uh, so it's just really changed my perspective about how everyone in the world works, because I think everybody just, it's healthy to address mental health, even if you are, normal and don't have any diagnosis of whatever. It's just important to tap into our feelings. And it's just a creative, I think as human beings, we're meant to have that emotional connection, I guess, or outlet. I don't know what the words I'm looking for is, but I think it's something that we all need to address. And that's where this whole project has landed me. And I don't know if I ever explained the whole point of the bipolar butterfly is originally it was the two sides of bipolar. But I also feel like it represents all mental illness, because on one side, we're all trying to show, our game face and our best beautiful self, and we're fine. And we have no idea what's happening on the other side. So many of us are crumbling. And my biggest thing is, and my children will tell you, and I tell you, it's kindness. None of us know what anyone's experiencing. And I don't care how mean someone is or how just you don't make sense how that person, there's something happening there. Either they're not getting hugged enough, or they're not getting enough sunlight. I don't know what it is. I had a terrific life. I can't complain. I feel like I've gotten everything I need. So I assume a lot of people don't get everything they need. So just be kind.
Yeah, that's sorry, that's fantastic advice. I just I'll throw it over to Nick for the next question, but just kind of something you said that's interesting, and it's come up a couple of times in the podcast before, and just how your own mental health challenges have changed your perspective and how you look at things. But I mean, I think the one thing that I hope that when people share their stories and we kind of grow the conversation, it gets to the point where you don't necessarily have to go through your own mental health challenges or struggles to identify stuff like that, or to level with people, or to understand, to lend an ear, whatever you need to be to listen. So I think, once we get to that point where you can identify those things, I think that's, really important for us as a society. So I think that's a great point that you made.
Absolutely. And for me, so many people I know that I talk to, they're like, you're so brave for opening up, and I have whatever happened in my life, but I don't talk about it. And I'm like, but that's what I'm hoping to change. It shouldn't be brave to open up. It should be normal. I feel like my children should be able to say my mom's bipolar with total confidence, just like my mom's diabetic. It's, and I really think with this project in general, it is so easy to combat, the stigma against it. All you just need to do is talk. There's no easier way to battle any front united, but just opening up and talking and asking friends, how are you doing? Because honestly, even my friends, and I'm very open about my mental health. Like, I'm an open book. I love to talk about it. I'm an oversharer for a lot of people. Hi, I'm Kimmy, I'm bipolar. Tell me about you. But yeah, I talk a lot, and I think I just lost train of thought of what I'm saying, but I just think it's important to not be afraid. I understand that a lot of people are afraid, and I don't want to push people, but I just wish everyone had something in their life that they could just talk about it without feeling like they have to go out of their comfort zone to find help. That makes sense?
Yeah.
100%. And I think, it sounds like, you're speaking our language. Everything that we're trying here is just, Lawson and I, with Tad being the, driving force behind, what Lawson and I have tried to do the last 10 months is, being able to be comfortable in, talking with a friend, but also friends realizing that it's very difficult for people to share, and being, everybody's got their own, at the end of the day, everybody's got their own problems, issues, challenges, whatever you want to call it. Right. And so it's hard to really look at how maybe somebody else is acting if you're not with them on a daily basis, or just seeing the overall, changes. So, you hit the nail on the head, and asking somebody how they are actually doing, and sort of almost being hypersensitive to the fact that like Lawson said it so many times, and just asking somebody how are you doing? And when they respond fine, be like, no, how are you doing? I've got, 10 minutes. I don't want to talk at all. Tell me how you're doing. Right. And just being able to like safe space, and like creating that space for somebody to be vulnerable with you and like really listen and be like, I have no like agenda here. I'm just like actually concerned with like how you're doing. So I think, what you've said is right along the lines, and we commend you for what you're doing and know that you'll make a difference. But sort of just to wrap up here, we like to ask some questions, just sort of as it pertains to Tad and what we're all about. So how would you, I know that you said that you have people reach out to you all the time, but how do you talk to or ask someone about their mental health?
For my personal community, I think everyone that knows me pretty much knows that this is my passion and this is my because like I said, sometimes I think I make people uncomfortable because I will be really open about mine and kind of imply, okay, now tell me yours, and a lot of people aren't ready for that. But yeah, I'm an oversharer in general, and my whole life I feel like it's kind of too much, and now it turns out it's not too much. This is a good thing for other people. So yeah, I don't really know specific detail other than I literally am an open book. And because of social media through Facebook or Instagram, I mean, my entire circle, and plus just local media and the murals I've done and whatnot, it's all been in this Northeast Ohio vicinity. So everyone knows that I'm pretty comfortable talking about it, which is nice because then I feel like people can approach me. I don't like to approach people and put them on the spot. You know what I mean? I feel like when people are ready and they want to approach and talk about it, that's a double-edged sword because you can't always wait, because a lot of times you don't find out that somebody's struggling until something happens, and actually I feel like maybe I should be more proactive about that, but yeah. I feel
We're
like
all learning, right? We're all learning how
exactly.
like, best practices.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a good thing. Like, okay, with you guys, and just in the last month or so, I've really gotten introduced with Bipolar Creative and the whole social mental health network. Because like what you're doing is amazing, and it's exactly what I'm like. Oh my gosh, this is what I want to do, and I didn't realize there's tons of platforms out there, and you guys are succeeding, and it is just phenomenal. Because when I hear people talk about stuff now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I know exactly how that feels, And if I would have heard that before I believed I was mentally ill, I think it would have been easier for me to be like, okay, I recognize that, you know what I mean? And to not be in denial for as long as I was, and to let myself get to a point where I had to be away from my children and whatnot.
Right. Yeah, certainly. And you even said that, point before, kind of in a little bit of a different way, but it's just all about the only way to do that is just by sharing and talking about it. So it's very true. And then before you go, the last thing that we'll ask is just, what does mental well-being look like to you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I personally struggle with this because when I am being really productive and inspired to do all this creativity, sleep is my number one gauge for how I am mentally. And when I'm excited like this, I do not sleep enough. I know that about myself, and I should be better about it. But for mental, honestly, sleep is my biggest gauge, and of course, exercise and all that stuff. And I hate to admit it, but I am like the worst example for physical health. I have a terrible diet. I eat terribly, and I'm just very. My husband, he's like, really? Yeah. I'm just very, very chaotic, and I don't have the most structured part of my life is my children's school schedule, and that's out the window right now. So I just yeah. So ideally, I think for most people, just to have that regime, and to make sure you get exercise and get your sleep. But I wish I was better at practicing what I preach when it comes to that.
Well, that's awesome. And I think, what we've, learned within this 30 minutes is it is a learning process, right? And we're all we all have the best intentions, but continuing to learn along the way. And everybody's got their own stuff going on. And I love what you said about being kind, but I also sort of want to, bring a little bit of my personal experience in. And I was actually, talking to my counselor the other day, and she and I are just talking through some stuff. And I'm sitting here, being very jealous of you and the fact that, you seem to be such an open book that you don't necessarily let your mental illness have power over you. And while there may be things that you need to work on, just sort of the emotional power that they potentially any mental illness can have over somebody is, I'm looking at you and being like, I wish I could get to Kimmy's, just complete openness and almost like walk into a room, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the narrative, but to walk in and be like, like I struggle with mental health challenges, and I'm totally okay with that, and sort of getting rid of that power that it potentially has. Like, that's so cool. So
I'm glad that that's considered cool because, like I said, I just feel like sometimes I'm too much of an overshare. Actually, before all this, now that this is established and I realize it's healthy, I'm glad to be an overshare, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's great, and we're certainly glad to have you on. So thanks so much for joining us. I think I speak for Nick when I say that we've both thoroughly enjoyed having you on. And also, if you haven't checked out Kimmy's story yet,
can you tell us where we can find you on social media?
The Bipolar Butterfly Project on Instagram and Facebook, and there is bipolirbutterflyproject.com that has a link to my story and then links to my social media. I also have Makiki's Art is my actual business, and Makiki's Art can be found on those media platforms. But I'm just trying to channel this as its own thing rather than an extension of my art, if that makes sense. I want it to be its own thing. So you can find some about me at Makiki's Art, but you can find more about the project at bipolirbutterflyproject.com.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was totally fun, and I honestly, truly am happy that you guys are doing this.